Hey everyone, welcome back to your favorite sales podcast. I'm your host, Russ Rich, and today we have a very special guest. We have Marina Golemis, who is the SVP of North America Sales at ShipBob. And yeah, we're going to have an awesome conversation today. Welcome.
Thank you, Ross. I'm pumped to be here.
Amazing, amazing. Well, before we get into some of the fun topics around driving execution excellence, would love to hear a bit about your background and how you found and stumbled your way into revenue leadership. So, yeah, would love to hear kind of your personal story in terms of how you ended up as the SVP of North America Sales.
Yeah, so I always say, my internship was behind a bar, right? Like that's where I was really learning to sell, was in college behind the bar. I didn't realize it at the time, but I was learning to build rapport, upsell, cross sell, got to get those tabs up so we can get those tips up. And so that's really where I realized that communicating with people and like building relationships is something that I love to do. And if I could monetize,
Mm,
that's awesome. I graduated from college at a time where it was kind of challenging to get a job. So I took the first job that, I could find that was an entry level BDR position, and it was great. Cut my teeth in a very high velocity cold outreach environment. And I feel like that's just the best way to really prepare yourself for a life of sales leadership. And so from there, it was bouncing around a few startups. I love startups. It's in my DNA. I love the chaos. I thrive in kind of the gray area of that. So I joined ShipBob about 6 years ago. It was a very small startup back then, about 4 years old at the time, based in Chicago.
how many
And
people were there when you joined?
let's see, they were probably 150.
Okay, awesome. So early days.
Yeah, exactly. And so we do e-commerce fulfillment. And so we have a network of fulfillment centers all across the world now. So just to put it in perspective, when I joined, we had four fulfillment centers. Today we have 55. So there's some serious growth going on there. And
Amazing.
yeah, I just moved up through the ranks a little bit, overseeing the account executive team, some individual contributors, then the entire team. Spent a little bit of time with the success team and took over implementation and solutions engineering in that time. So it's been a wild ride.
All the things. Yeah, no, it's great to have the point of view of the entire customer experience. Sometimes, it can kind of get like siloed and not the whole kind of what does the customer experience throughout the entire journey. So that's really cool to hear.
Yeah, super impactful.
Amazing. Well, thanks for the context. Maybe before we jump into some of the execution excellence strategies, what has been the hardest part about moving into revenue leadership?
I would say, the pressure that I put on myself is probably the hardest part,
Mm,
right? Like I have amazing collaboration with my CRO, all of leadership, and then, the folks that I manage as well. It's just holding myself to the super high standard, and we're hitting some big numbers now. And so to maintain that growth, maintain that scale, has been a lot of pressure, but I do it to myself, but I think that's also why I love it.
totally. No, that's a great introspective answer. And is, yeah, I think definitely the case with most top performers is it comes from a drive from within. So yeah, it's a good thing to remind ourselves. The stress is usually all in our head. So especially at this end of quarter, month, half right now for everyone when we're recording. But yeah, shifting gears. I asked you before the episode to come up with three of your kind of top of mind strategies for driving execution excellence, and absolutely love them, especially the first one, which is blowing shit up. Out with the old, in with the new. I think 2024 and the last just couple of years has been all about what has worked doesn't necessarily work anymore, and a lot of people have built careers on playbooks that just need to completely be redesigned. So would love your take on, why this is so important and kind of top of mind right now.
Yeah, 100%. So the first time I realized that this was important was when I was actually asked to join the success team a couple of years ago at ShipBob. And so while I'd been at the company for a long time, I didn't, I wasn't as familiar with the processes on the success team. And so I came in and kind of had that fresh perspective where I started questioning everything. Just why do we
Mm,
do it like this? Why is this the process? And the leader on that team, who's incredible, a lot of his answers were just like, oh, this is just how we've been doing it, right? And that's
totally.
a lot of leaders fall into that because we're so focused on the day-to-day execution. Who's got time to zoom up, right? And try to figure that out. So
Hmm.
once we started questioning everything and making those changes, you realize that first of all, they're not such high magnitude changes that it's going to take like a massive overhaul. You can make some really quick iterative changes quickly. And so when I came back to the sales org, I started questioning everything again. And I think what I realized quickly was we were operating off of iterations of a playbook built in 2014.
Mm,
Does that make sense anymore? And I just think so. I made it like my standard practice rather than wait for an external hire to come in with a new perspective and tell me what the issue is. I just force myself to zoom up once in a while, pull myself out of the weeds, and I force my leaders to do it as well. Not force, ask them kindly, of course, with respect. But we zoom up and we just question, all right, we know we've been doing it like this, but is it still working or is this more of a bottleneck now? So I think it's a good standard practice.
totally. And where does the confidence come from to be able to come into, maybe a newer part of the business and rethink things? I think I always personally struggle with, hey, this person's an expert. There's a reason they're doing this. Or even for my own stuff, like you said, you get so into the details day to day, it feels almost overwhelming to not just be focusing on doing the thing really well in front of you and rethinking a lot of stuff at the same time.
Mhm.
You know, was there, a mistake you made or a learning that you had that really gave you kind of the confidence and mindset to focus on the ability to just kind of completely change stuff that you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, we can record a whole separate episode on the confidence journey and how, that's happens over time. But I think the reality is sometimes knowing less is really beneficial because ignorance is bliss. And so I come in and my questions were genuine. I genuinely wanted to know why we do it like that. Whereas the leader that's been doing it that way for a long time probably is so deep in the weeds that they're not rising up to question that. And so once I realized that asking those questions leads to a lot of positive change, then I became not as, gun shy to ask those questions
Mm,
and like, hey, I'm just curious, why do you guys do it like that? And I think that speaks volumes to the collaborative culture we have here at ShipBob because I have, product leaders coming and asking me why we run a sales process a certain way because they have genuine curiosity and they want to better understand so they can do their job. So I think being open, we don't have a stay in your lane culture. We have a like get in
mm,
everyone else's lane, let's help each other out culture.
totally. Yeah, that's a good easier said than done, I think, to build a culture like that, and definitely starts at the top. Um, Awesome. So good reminder for folks that are, yeah, focused maybe on the things in front of them. Maybe it's just time for a redesign and ask ourselves why we're doing it. And I think it's great to, yeah, collaborate with your peers, and they're going to have maybe a different perspective. Maybe they're not the expert on it. Maybe it comes from a product leader, engineering leader, to
Mhm.
look at your sales or onboarding or success process and kind of think about things from first principles when things change, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, moving on to our second strategy for driving execution excellence, I think is a great segue from blowing shit up, is being strategic about when to roll up your sleeves and get things done yourself, and when you need to think about processes and making it scalable. It's interesting that you say this, and I think with a bit of a lens of being more strategic, when I found a lot of companies right now that have maybe had layoffs or more kind of market pressures to have leaders kind of go down to the field and execute, and maybe we're further away than the realities. I think your company, obviously high growth, and having people kind of stretch themselves to leadership positions. Curious why this is also kind of number two in your list of driving excellence in execution.
Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword because from a high level, you would think that like, oh, your leaders get behind you, the whole company bands together to hit a goal. What else could you want as a sales leader, right? And
Exactly.
and that has been my experience, and that's been awesome. But the problem is that this roll up your sleeves and get it done attitude lends itself to completely overlooking all process, right? Especially in this remote culture and remote world. So it's one
Mm,
of the conversations that are happening in Slack. And so these processes are not repeatable, they're not scalable, and they are incredibly difficult to recreate in the future. So
mhm,
we realized at one point that it was just driving to longer sales cycle at a certain point where the scales tip, and you're finding that everything, once you have more than I would say two or three involved in a deal. So let's say you need a sign off from legal, finance, and compliance.
mhm,
Like having those conversations one off no longer is beneficial to you, and you really need to create a process. So, what I did was roll out a deal desk process, which is really new to us. And I think something
mm.
that much more well established, just like being in startups, you hear about this as this like far unicorn of like a established company.
Yeah.
All right, I think we're there. We got to do the deal desk.
Got it. Got it. And curious to hear, especially going through that motion. And, it sounds similar to my experience at Stripe, where we just had a lot of smart people doing smart things. And then it got to a point where that wasn't the best thing for our customers in the business. and people that were really good at kind of figuring it out weren't necessarily the people that were great at scaling it and running out processes. So how have you found the team adjusting to maybe new roles in a world where things might be more structured and organized?
Yeah, so I hate to rely on a framework, but I rely on a framework, right? You kind of have to at this point because otherwise there is just so much subjectivity to roles. And so I use a RACI framework, right? And so I say for every segment of the business, in order to close new business, here's the person responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed.
Hmm.
And it's really helped eliminate some of that gray area and make things a little bit more black and white because that person knows that this is their responsibility. If they can't be there, if they're going on vacation, if they're going to be out of town, if they're busy with another project, it is their responsibility to find somebody else to step in. And so now I don't have my AEs hunting people down on Slack trying to figure out who's going to help them get the deal over the line.
Totally. Yeah, that internal alignment and stakeholder management. Yeah, sometimes the hardest part is just getting in our own way, and not just the customer for sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So we talked a bit about rethinking processes and blowing shit up and getting, our peers' perspectives on stuff. We've talked about making sure we have the right balance in terms of, you know, thinking at the process level, but also making sure it gets done on the field. The last piece that you had was delighting in what you don't know, and a bit about, your experience kind of building out peer network and thinking about personal brands. So I'd love to hear your kind of journey, very meta as you're on this podcast right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think part of it ties back to the confidence journey where I think we've all been at that point in our career where you're sitting in a big room, you've earned the seat at the table, and you're hearing people say things. And in your mind, you're questioning, well, like, is that right? Or I kind of want to make this comment. You
Mm.
don't make the comment, then someone else makes the comment, and everyone's like, brilliant. You're like, oh, shit, I should have said that. Right. Like, and I think that that's a really common situation because when I get close with people, they tell me, oh, I'm kind of experiencing this right now. So I was doing that for a long time. And
Mhm.
then I started to speak up. And I think that is part of this confidence journey in this building. But taking it back to delighting in what I don't know, everyone you're told especially as a sales leader, you should build a personal brand. You should post more on LinkedIn and you should do all of these things. And I think some people like yourself are excellent at it. And then some people just have not prioritized that. And that is me. And so I thought that building a personal brand was just a lot of work and I just didn't have time for it in my life.
Mhm.
But based on just kind of organic networking, I did create this great network of other sales leaders and not even sales leaders, other folks that I just really respect and I think are just a lot smarter than me and are experts in their field.
Mhm.
And anytime I have a problem I can't solve, I generally tap on some of these folks and consult them. And they always have a point of view that is so different than mine that
Mm.
it just gives me like it delights me, it gives me confidence in the fact that any problem can be solved. You just kind of have to pursue different avenues to get there.
Yeah, no, I think definitely reflects my experience going from being an AE to having to be a founder. And yeah, that kind of lack of confidence, maybe to be like, what am I doing in this role? Right. You talked a lot about your personal growth, and, taking on new teams where, hey, I didn't even do this IC role. Why am I managing this group of people and telling them
Hmm.
how to be successful? And that could sometimes be really challenging. So that definitely, I'm sure resonates with a lot of folks that are listening in. Any
Yeah.
advice you would have for them? Specifically things that you did that you felt like got you over that imposter syndrome, for maybe lack of a better word.
No, I was going to say every single person you've probably ever encountered has had imposter syndrome at some point. I'm 100% confident from, the most confident and competent CEOs all the way down to some entry level folks. And so I think, everyone says this and it's so cliche, but I find it to be so true is the biggest growth happens when you're uncomfortable. So like taking over that success team was an incredibly uncomfortable motion for me. I was all about selling the dream, not what happens after. Right. And so, but that was where I grew the most as a leader. I was able to create a much better synergy for our customers because I was able to tie that entire journey together for
Hmm.
them when I came back to the sales side. So I think every challenge that's placed in front of you, like I'm a big yes person. I say yes to most things that are asked from me, but I do dig my heels in the sand on resources. So I
Mm,
say yes, but let's make sure that I'm set up to, kind of be able to execute on this. So I think it's just towing that line and trusting your intuition, trusting your experience, your point of view, because it really is 100% unique. No one else has your point of view.
totally. And one word that comes to mind, or like phrase that I heard for people that can be successful doing different things, is like horizontal thinkers. Like you've learned from other experiences, even if you're going into something new, like you said, you need to trust that intuition that you've gained from other experiences. And I think in, in our culture and society in the Western world, we think a lot about like the technical capabilities versus like the experiential stuff that we've picked up. And I think
Yeah.
that I've thought a lot about that recently. And kind of mirrors, I think, some of your experience picking up other functions. It's like, hey, like I understand people, I understand processes, I understand the customer. Okay, how can I apply that to other parts of the business?
Yeah, exactly. And I think staying in your lane is the, kind of synonymous with your comfort zone. So you stay in your lane because this is what you're good at, this is what you know, this is what you consider yourself an expert at. But and obviously it helps to have that culture that fosters that lane deviation. Once you start to deviate out of your lane, that's where you're picking up new skills and adding so much value to those folks with your skill set. So it's mutually beneficial. I think people have to be collaborative to be successful. And so I think that's really taken me pretty far in my career.
Awesome. Well, to wrap on that piece, any advice you'd have for folks that are maybe, thinking about ways to get out of their comfort zone or to meet other folks that might be, like you said, energizing and inspiring in their network? Like, what have you found some great ways to connect with other peers?
Yeah, I would say yes to a lot more than you're saying yes to today, right? So whether it's peer groups and meetups, obviously be mindful of your boundaries, your family, your schedule, and all that. But peer groups and meetups, joining different, um, you and I met through a peer group. Like I just think it's so incredibly important, and it happens organically. You don't have to go out of your
Hmm.
way and become this new LinkedIn influencer, content creator. You could just say yes to things and it will
Yeah.
kind of naturally come. And most of those of us who are in this business naturally like other people, I hope, because
Yeah.
you're spending an awful lot of time talking to them.
Totally. Yeah, I agree. I always thought about networking as this like super proactive, have to be really thoughtful about how you do it versus just like, yeah, how do I do this? I usually say no to this thing or ask a friend, hey, what are you doing? Things that happen just kind of organically, I think make a ton of sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, we just to quickly recap what we talked about, blowing shit up. How do you kind of think differently about, and especially from first principles in this market? Great to be kind of using peers to think about that stuff. Number two, knowing when to roll up your sleeves. It's great. People want to lead from folks that are, can show them the way and how to do a job very well, but you need to know when to do that, or you're going to be way too tied up in the details and not nailing the processes. And then three, yeah, delight in what you don't know. Gain that confidence by talking to peers, get energized. And yeah, like we were talking about before, it's a very cathartic experience sometimes when you're going through tough stuff. It's not just you. And make sure you have that support system of peers. But yeah, Marina, this was super fun. Hopefully helpful for other folks out there listening in, and appreciate you taking time out of the busy day to share some of your learnings and advice.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Have a good one.
You too.